Hey, welcome to Slumber Podcast Massacre with TNA. That's Tim.
That's Andy.
And this is a podcast about horror. Each episode we're going to dive in and talk about a different horror classic or obscure rarity from the back of your video store shelf. Remember those? This week we're going to be talking about the 1981 or 2, I forget already. 81 classic The Funhouse by Universal Studios.
Yeah, folks, this is an interesting one. It's born out of the rage that was slasher films in the early 80s. We're talking right in the middle of those golden years between 78 and 84. This came out in 81, and it was basically Universal's response to Paramount having huge success with the Friday the 13th films. They said, hey, we want something that is horror. We want something with teens. Let's find it. And they came up with the Funhouse.
Yeah.
And, right off the bat, just from what the title tells you, just in and of itself, we're talking about a really perfect setting for a horror film. Carnivals, and of course we're going to get into this more in a bit, but carnivals by their very nature are creepy. They're fun. They're exciting, but there's also that sort of element of otherworldliness.
Yeah, very unsettling.
Yeah, transient.
Are you a fair guy? Do you like going to the fair?
I do.
We, up here in the Midwest, we call them more fairs than carnivals.
Yeah, we do, and I do like it because you kind of wonder, like, where do all these people go when the fair isn't happening?
Right.
Like, not just from the carnies or carnival workers, sorry, not just the carnies themselves.
We can call them carnies.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm going to. Not just the carnies, but even just the patrons. And trust me, I'm not trying to be holier than thou, but you do see a different segment of your community kind of come out en masse.
Yes.
For these gatherings. So yeah, it is. It's definitely a great arena for people watching, and it does feel like a different slice of life than our typical big box store.
Yeah.
Daily 9-to-5 existence.
See, I am not a fair guy for those very reasons. That is not something that appeals to me much at all. I get what's there. I've seen it. I don't need to see it again.
You don't need like a 20th neon pink yardstick?
No.
Or you don't need to be...
I have plenty of 2 liters of generic soda that I won in a ring game.
How would you like to learn about 16 different 3 Seasons setups that you can have? Or maybe a hot tub? Listen, you might be listening to this on the other side of the world, but apparently, at least in the minds of these vendors, you absolutely have to have a 3 Seasons room and a hot tub in your home because they are relentless.
Yeah.
In trying to sell this to you.
Part.
Yeah. So there's all these sorts of strange elements when you get to a carnival, when you get to a fair. And this movie does a really great job of putting you right in the middle of that. It's not like they've got 1 or 2 rides set up and they try to make the most of that. I mean, this is a full-on carnival setup for real. And for anyone that's been there, it feels exactly like that. Like you're right there.
Yeah, they hired they did this during the carnival off-season. That was something I learned. Carnivals have seasons. During the off season, they all go down to Miami. So first, let's say something I totally had forgotten about when we picked this movie, directed by Tobe Hooper of Texas Chainsaw Massacre fame and Poltergeist fame. But he loved carnivals. He was given this script. He decided he had a choice of studios to go to, and he went to Universal. And they gave him this script, and he's like, I love carnivals. I want to do carnivals. I'm fascinated by carnivals. So they asked him how much he did, like, Chainsaw for, and he was like, well, 60,000, but it was over budget at 90. And they were like, how'd you like to do a movie for, like, 500,000? Which I think that eventually the budget for this was like $2 million they gave him. And so they went and they hired one of these carnivals to just come and set up. So that's how like there are a couple really cool shots in this of these great overhead like crane shots that were pretty new. Like no one had really done something like that before.
Right.
Where it's a full carnival going on.
And what's so funny about that, and completely ironic, is that they give them $5 million to play with. They hire an entire carnival setup, and yet they have the same actor playing about 5 different carnival
three
barker
barkers. That was Kevin Conway, who the year before had just won a Tony. Like this, he's not a slouch.
No,
I did have to look at those guys and be like, is that the same guy? There were 2 where you're like, I'm pretty sure that's the same guy. But then the English guy.
Right. No, he does a great job.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about a legitimately
That was
great
one
actor.
of his, like, if I do this, I get to play all the barkers. And they're like,
Right.
okay, fine. And they killed it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and you mentioned Tobe Hooper, and that's really the element that stands out for me most in this film. Is it just goes to show the importance of a director. And I'm going to go off on a tangent here real quick to sort of explain this. But when I was in college, one of the several times that I was in college, I thought I had it all worked out in the beginning, where I was going to pick a schedule where I had no classes before noon, and that was going to be ideal. I'm going to party all night. I don't have to go to class until noon. This is perfect. And then I started going to these classes, and as fate would have it, I just had some really genuinely boring professors, and it was just kind of just drudgery getting through it. And so I started learning who the better professors were as I got into school more. And I realized that it was worth it, even if I had to get up and drag myself there at 8 o'clock in the morning. It was worth going to that class with a good professor, because it just made the experience that much better.
Right.
And that's what we've got here is, and we can debate this a little bit, but we've got what I would consider a pretty run-of-the-mill film here, just based on its basic ingredients. But you add Tobe Hooper to the mix, and then everything gets elevated, and suddenly you have a sense of style, you have a sense of pacing, you have a sense of scene setup, and really without him, this movie probably isn't on anybody's radar, but he really does elevate things here.
Yeah, he builds the suspense very well, because nothing happens for an hour in this movie.
And that's, folks, that's not a joke. Literally.
Literally.
Like no kills at all.
No.
And you get
cheap jumps, but that's it.
Yeah.
The weird setup in the beginning with the brother as the killer.
Boy, it felt like they felt like they had to do that.
Right.
Didn't it? I mean, It felt like we've got to do the Halloween segment where we put the mask over the camera lens. You hear the killer breathing. It almost felt like they had to check that off their to-do list, in order to make this movie. It's always effective. I mean, it's always interesting from a viewer standpoint. But yeah, there's a whole lot of nothing. And it was
2 birds with 1 stone, because it's like, well, we can get our boobs in here as well.
Oh yeah,
breasts right off the bat.
Yeah. And
that's 2 movies we've done already out of 3 where like first shot breasts.
It started me thinking a little bit when I saw this one, and trust me, I'm never going to argue with a filmmaker that decides to show us the female form quickly and explicitly. But it just sort of reminded me just how rampant the nudity was in these films in the 80s. I mean, we all know that anyway.
Yeah.
But I just, now revisiting some of these, didn't realize just how in your face it was.
Yeah.
And it is.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's, because, my kid was sitting in the room with me when it started, and I'm like, it's the beginning, it's fine. Then I'm like, oh, God, please, you're looking at your phone, right? Okay, good.
Yeah, so they waste no time with the nudity, but they waste all kinds of time before they get to actually killing anyone. But it's okay, because you've got that Tobe Hooper style. It goes back to something that Andy was alluding to as far as that crane shot. And that's what I want to talk about a little bit is some of the style that goes into this storytelling. And Andy and I were talking before we started, and to me, even though Tobe Hooper directed it, but it really feels like a Spielberg style of storytelling, which is prior to Spielberg's movies, E.T. and everything that came thereafter. Filmmaking was a little jarring. They hadn't really smoothed out the editing process. It felt kind of jumpy. It felt sort of grainy. And Spielberg comes along and he offers this new style where you do have these crane shots, sort of easing the viewer down into the scene. You've got some music that captures the tone of the scene playing as we just sort of gently fade down into it. And it really was this sort of, for lack of a better word, kind of like a hand-holding way of storytelling from the director to the audience. But it's very effective, and it makes things very watchable. And that's what this movie is. It is, while it might not offer you a ton of excitement right away, it's extremely watchable.
I do feel I was more engaged before the insanity started happening, because the last half hour is crazy.
Yeah.
But everything before that, like the last half hour, there's a lot of, just you've got to kind of disassociate yourself and be like, how did that happen or whatever. But the first hour is all very believable. Like everything that happens, I'm like, yeah, okay, that's a great order of events.
Yeah, you're right. There's that moment where the kids, what we've got here is we've got two couples going on a double date to the carnival. And when they're at the carnival, the one friend, Richie, I believe his name is, decides that
the guy who wants to work in a bank. There's no way that guy's not gunning for a Wall Street job someday.
Yeah, those tortoiseshell glasses, just, man, he's...
Yeah, like this was a year where I'm like, is this guy a nerd or was this what you strove for?
Yeah, because he kind of comes across as sort of like the party boy, but yet he also wants to do my taxes.
Right.
Like I couldn't... I didn't know
his girlfriend was beautiful.
Yeah, really, yeah. So these
his name was Liz.
Liz, Liz and Richie.
She's not just a girl.
And Liz fills that space of sort of the more experienced friend. She's sexually active. She smoked marijuana. She's a little bit more of a free spirit. Amy, our final girl, does kind of fulfill the prerequisites of virginal.
Yeah.
She passes on the marijuana the first couple times around.
She tells her dad she's going to the movies. She's like, can we just go to the movies? I told my dad that's what we were doing. And they're all like, shut up.
Right, yeah. So she's got good intentions, and you can tell that, typically she's a good girl. But by the time they're at the carnival, Richie comes up with this great idea. Hey, let's just spend the night here all night, which... I'm sorry, I'm not going to blame the guy for that because I've thought about that and wanted to do that a million times. No, maybe not necessarily at a carnival, but like at a big box store. Like you kind of see some racks in an opening there and you're like, man, I bet nobody would know.
Yeah.
And so he gets this great idea and but back to what you were saying as far as it feeling real. You see this moment where they do the sort of round-robin calls to the parents. Amy says she's spending the night at Liz's house. Liz says she's spending the night at Amy's house. And it's all very relatable for anybody that's ever been, 15, 16 years old before.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's nice and down to earth in the beginning.
Yeah. And then it gets crazy. Because this is there are no kills for the first hour at all. I mean, there are only 4 deaths in the whole... 5.
Right.
5 deaths in the whole movie. 3 of our protagonists, 1 ancillary character, and then the big bad. Like, that's it, right?
And his father.
The Barker. That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. But they all seem to have purpose. There's nothing like slasher killing about it.
Right, they're not just sort of ramping up the body count.
Yeah, they're
for
just no
excitement's
victims.
sake. Right,
everyone dies as a consequence of something that happened before. I'm just realizing that now. It's blowing my mind.
It's true because in so many slasher films of that era, it was almost as if the kills were driven by the makeup department as much as they were the storyline. So it was like you had these extra kills that would be thrown in, kind of introductions of sort of throwaway characters, just so that we could see a fun and inventive kill. But this movie doesn't do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, some of the kills are... I feel they are... And this is where it kind of goes off the rails for me a little bit, where you got to kind of just shut your brain off. Because when 3 people die where you're like, yes, that's how they died. The 3 kids, it's a very weird... There's the scene... A rope just comes down and gets the guy by the neck, and you're like, who did that? Who did that with the rope? Was it the monster creature? Liz drops down this trap door, which then closes itself, but then she's shown like alone in a tunnel, and you're like, well, wait, did the trap door open by itself and close by it? Like, who's controlling that trap door?
Sure. No, I'm glad.
So bits like that.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because it's almost worth the price of admission, folks, for you to just see the moments before and after Richie's death. Okay, so Andy's talking about this rope sort of dropping down from nowhere. But prior to that happening, there is this unintentionally hysterical setup where Richie is telling a story that he thinks might be useful to them working their way out of this funhouse, which, let's just catch ourselves up plot-wise here. The kids decide to stay the night in the funhouse, and then the sort of evilness that, is the actual workers there, and we'll explore some of that later too. Like, is this entire carnival evil,
right,
or do we just have a couple evil elements here? But long story short, they are very much locked into this funhouse, which, to give you a visual image, if you haven't seen the film, it is it's the same mechanism that is where you get in a two-person cart, and you're sort of pulled on a track through the metal doors that swing open, and then you see the various animatronics. Yeah. So that's
a lot of pneumatic.
Right, a lot of hydraulics and steam and all that stuff. So this is the building that they're in. But for purposes of the story, or maybe I've just been in a lot of really crappy fun houses, but this one is way bigger than your
it's
average
very
fun
elaborate.
house. Yeah, and so anyway, the kids are in there, and Richie is telling a story, trying to think of some insight that can get them out of this locked fun house that they're trapped in now, and he tells a story about how he hid in a closet waiting for his brother because he wanted to scare him, and then he realized that his brother was just waiting on the other side to scare him.
Yeah,
and that he
which
eventually.
I loved that story.
It was a nice story.
I related to that. Like, that to me was like watching a horror movie by yourself. Like, even as adults, that can still be a little off-putting because my brain starts going, man, what if someone was waiting until this moment when I was scared to then attack me, where I would be like, no, I'm just watching. It's just a movie. Nothing's going to happen to me. And they're like, that's exactly when I'm going to pounce.
Yes.
And so I really related to that story.
No, it's an engaging moment, and the actor does a really nice job of setting it up, and you sort of feel some genuine sympathy towards Richie at that part.
I feel like that bit was his audition.
And he
was
nailed
about
it.
the only great part he did.
But what's hysterical is he's telling this story where you do feel really engaged, but the last line is, him talking about eventually being scared and locked in this closet for 3 hours. And then he says the line, I pissed my pants. And then immediately, we go right into that segment of the rope dropping and him being strung up and hung, hanged, I should say, by his neck. But it's just so unintentionally hilarious that is the last sentence that he says, right. I pissed my pants. Bam! It goes right into the kill, and it's really a laugh out loud moment. Unintentional, but great. But you're right. We have to kind of ask ourselves, was there an intention to kill him by somebody strategically dropping a noose that would perfectly catch his neck?
Right.
Or it almost feels like it's part of an automated mechanism. So I had to go back. I actually rewound that part to watch it again. And what I got out of it was just that, yes, they were, you're kind of suspending your disbelief here, but that the antagonists are dropping the rope to hook him and pull him up and hang him. Now,
yeah, because it was like a two-part, because everything starts going off. Like when he says that, everything comes to life in the funhouse where they're standing, and during the commotion, that rope drops down. So I feel like it's implied. So we haven't really talked about, there's a monster in this movie. He's a human, but he's a deformed monster. And I think it's implied that he's the one, he would have the strength to pull him back up, right? But someone else is starting this stuff, and it just seems very coordinated.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of suspension of disbelief in this movie where you're better off to like Andy said, just turn your brain off, go with it, and it's a lot more fun that way. And that's definitely kind of the first scene where we really...
There are very few moments, though.
Yeah.
Less than other horror movies.
True. But what's great about Richie is he gets this sort of double kill. Now, we're led to believe that he dies by hanging, or you would assume that. But there's kind of an outside chance where maybe he didn't. But regardless, immediately after his death, the remaining kids are startled by this slow-moving cart that's coming down the track, and it has some sort of form in it. And you really can't make out what that form is, and you think, oh, it's that monster, humanoid that Andy was referencing, or it's some other crazy carnival creep or something, or maybe it's some sort of dummy. You don't really know, but either way...
And they've grabbed weapons.
Yeah, either way, Buzz...
Real weapons that are inside this traveling carnival.
Yeah, and Buzz, who is the Amy's date, our final girl's date, is ready to go with an axe, and he wastes no time. As soon as that thing is within striking distance...
Liz is like, kill it!
Yeah,
kill it!
She does. And he brings that axe absolutely right down on the top and rear portion of the head, and it turns out, oh, damn it, it's Richie.
Yeah, I hope he was dead.
Yeah, if he wasn't dead before, he is definitely dead now.
Yeah.
So a really, really fun, one of my more favorite moments of the movie.
Yeah, and that's a great shot after that, as like then Liz, like there's just this shot where the camera's in front of that cart as it's moving through. He's dead, and Liz is like crying, chasing after it.
Yeah.
Really good shot.
Yeah.
Like, that's where a good director, like that shot wouldn't have been in it had
exactly
Shithead McGee directed this
right
movie.
No, yeah, and that's where you get the sense of style. And also, I mean, it might seem like sort of a minor detail, but as carnivals would have it, especially in the hands of an artist like Tobe Hooper, the colors in this movie are gorgeous.
Yeah, it looked really nice.
Really, really excellent use of dramatic lighting. I mean, you're set up for it, just you're spoon-fed beautiful visuals because we're in a carnival. And then in addition to that, you've got these saturated lights and colors, and so that just adds to the whole scenic element of the movie.
Yeah, and I don't know if it was the copy I was watching or if this was intentional or part of it, but I noticed a lot of times around like the tops and the borders would blur a little bit. So I don't know if that was because you saw that too? Okay, so yeah, I don't know if that's just a product of the quality of what they were working with at the time, or if that was an artistic choice. I feel it was not an artistic choice, but it looked cool.
Yeah, there was that moment where I especially noticed it, where there were some feet on the tracks of the where the carts go through the Funhouse, and everything is perfectly in focus for what you're looking at and sort of the focal point of the action. But down below at their feet at the bottom of the frame, it's very much sort of a blurred focus there. Yeah. So I'm not. Yeah. Intentional or not, it's cool.
Yeah, it looked nice. Okay, so we've made it this far, and we've only barely mentioned our antagonist, I guess, in the movie. There are a couple antagonists, but the horror draw is the son that you're led to believe. He calls him his boy. Right. The main Barker, who's outside the funhouse. Come in.
Alive, alive, alive.
You will beg for mercy. I can't do his voice, but he sounds awesome.
Yeah, he does. He's great.
Yeah, it is very foreboding.
Yeah,
that wouldn't give me pause just going in there. Like, why is this creepy guy trying to get me?
Like this is enough. I'm just going to watch him and freak out here. Yeah. Like I don't need to go in the funhouse.
So the way we're introduced to the main guy. So there's a in the funhouse, outside the funhouse, there was someone in like a Frankenstein costume because it was Universal Studios and they had the rights.
Oh God, nice catch.
Yeah. And also, there's the Frankenstein poster in the kids' room too.
Right.
We will definitely get to the kid, the brother. But anyway, he's a horror aficionado, it seems, at his young age. But anyway, so there's Frankenstein. He's working outside, helping people into the carts or whatever. So when the kids decide to stay in the funhouse overnight, they're in there making out, another boob shot. But that was it. Only the two. There were only the two shots. They hear some commotion below them, so they're looking through the floorboards, and it's the dude in the Frankenstein outfit and the fortune teller.
Right. And, I don't know if this is just me, folks. Maybe it's my personal kink, but I have always had a thing for these like traditional stereotypes of fortune tellers in movies. Maybe it's just because I have a bit of a Eastern European background,
Sure.
and I had some family members that had those accents, but I always loved that sort of alluring, hypnotic quality of, you know, your stereotypical fortune teller.
Yeah.
And this
Mysterious.
This
Love the
actress is-
bohemian look,
Yeah.
kind of. Yeah.
and she's older, but she's still kind of hot in her
Yeah.
in her own way, you know. And so yes, we have our Frankenstein character, which by the way has not been clearly defined at all, other than he is in the employ of the carnival.
Yeah.
He works there.
Doesn't talk.
We're given to understand that he is just this side of mute. You know,
Yeah.
we know that
He
there's some
seems
sort of
simple,
disability.
yeah.
There's a disability happening there, but he is meeting with the fortune teller for a sexual experience. So you don't necessarily get the impression that the fortune teller is always a prostitute, but maybe.
Right. She'll do it.
Yeah.
Because she makes him pay a sizable
Yeah, for
$100 in
1981,
1981.
$100. Yeah,
That's
it's a lot of money. So then we get
You could get several phones for that.
right. Then we get a really unexpected shot of premature ejaculation, which we don't. Well, let me just throw this out there. You don't actually see it.
No.
Okay. But we get a scene of that, and so essentially, what this, you know, to get to the point here, what this evolves into is this Frankenstein character feels that he's been ripped off because he didn't really get to see things through to completion, and he kills the fortune teller. Now, this is all seen by the four teenagers who are hiding out in the funhouse, and this is really the catalyst for all of the action that comes till the rest of the end of the film, because they've witnessed a murder. Maybe they would have gotten out.
Yeah.
Maybe if they would have just hid out, they might have survived. But now they've seen a murder.
Yeah.
And by some just unfortunate
Well, this is
accident.
all Richie's bullshit.
Right.
Richie gets them killed twice, essentially.
Right. There's some Richie makes some poor decisions, and there's some accidents that happen along the way. Long story short, the carnival barker and his Frankenstein masked son are now aware that somebody has witnessed the murder, and
Yep.
they know that they have no choice but to get rid of these witnesses. So that's the setup for the need for the murders,
Yeah.
basically, in the rest of the film.
But right before that, that's when we're introduced, because the Frankenstein brings the Barker back to the scene of the crime, and he's like, "Dude, you killed like one of us. Like, well, I could have get you a local lady to jerk you off like this, and now you've killed her." And there's this like obviously mental abuse that's probably been going on a long time, where he's telling the guy to hit himself, and Frankenstein's freaking out and hitting himself in the head, and it's this obvious aggression that I'm sure has happened several times. And then he finally rips the mask off, and lo and behold, way worse than Frankenstein. It's one of the more disturbing monster faces I feel I've seen.
Yeah, it's tough to describe if you haven't seen it, folks, but it's almost like a sort of grotesque, almost goat sort of inspired face, where you have a really wide distance between the eyes. You have these sort of sharp, discolored fangs, and this sort of flowy, wispy white hair. So it's really almost like an albino humanoid goat monster.
Well, what they were trying to... So earlier in the movie, when they're just enjoying the carnival, and they go into the little oddity tent, and there's a cow with like a cleft palate, which looks really weird.
Yeah.
And then they see a cow with two heads, which is real. That was not a special effect. They went out and found a cow with two heads and brought him in. And so they were trying to imply, because the monster's face also kind of has this split, so they wanted to leave this question of, because they never say who his parents are. The guy implies he's his dad.
Right.
You never know who his mom is. So it's this implication of, is he like part two-faced cow?
Right. Well, you're right. And it kind of brings up a broader topic about this movie. So, like Andy touched on, we've got the Frankenstein connection because of Universal. But we also have the Frankenstein connection because, Frankenstein holds a really unique place in the canon of monsters, of classic monsters, because he was so sympathetic. And he was sympathetic as a character because it seemed like his existence was beyond his control. While he might have murderous tendencies, is that really his fault?
Right. Or is that a result of abuse?
Right.
He's dealt with his entire life.
Right, yeah, or being kept out of society or just being different. So you have this character, and I'm not really sure if that this is something that this movie fully resolves or not. The idea of, am I supposed to be sympathetic towards this creature? Am I supposed to see him as human but just different, or is he a monster? And I don't really think the movie tries to answer that, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But you do get the impression that this creature has a homicidal history, and as they travel from city to city, that he, as this Carnival Barker supposed father says, gets into trouble.
Yeah.
So these murders have happened before.
Yeah, they set it up very early.
Yeah.
Because when Amy's going out with this new guy who works at a fill-up station, the mom is very judgmental and an alcoholic.
Right.
She's got 6 fingers of scotch as they're watching Bride of Frankenstein downstairs because they're going to milk that catalog as much as they can in this movie. But yeah, the dad's like, hey, don't go to that carnival. That's the same carnival that was in whatever town, and they found 2 dead girls
Right.
across the street.
Yeah, so we get a backstory, a simple and very early backstory that there's something suspicious and there's something scandalous about this carnival. And so that's set up very much in the beginning, and now we're sort of fleshing that storyline out where we realize that there's this humanoid type character / monster that has this history, but again, it goes back to is that really within its control? Yeah, I think you sort of get the impression that it isn't within that creature's or person's control.
Right, yeah.
Which brings
I don't think he knows any better.
Right. And it kind of brings up, and I don't want to make this too heady of a point, but it sort of makes you think about carnivals in general. And it's something that we were even kind of, joking about at the beginning of the cast here, is it okay to judge carnies? Is it okay to judge carnival people? Because for as sensitive as, and rightfully so, it's a nice progression in humanity that we are actually caring for people who are different or have disabilities now. But, carnies are still, it's pretty much open season on those folks. And I think it's because they're so transient.
Yeah.
They move into your
Not
town
gonna
for a
see
little
that
while.
guy
Yeah,
again.
they're moving away. It sort of takes away the guilt factor. And let's face it, a lot of those workers are very different types of people. Like they are personalities that are a little outside of the norm.
Yeah.
Which makes sense.
And they used to be, and this was kind of so like Tobe Hooper was drawn to this because he's loved carnivals, and in an interview he was like, when I was young, I loved going, and he's like, the rides were great, but what I loved the most was going around behind the tents and seeing these people like outside of the job part, and what are they really like behind the scenes. And they're just, they're people you don't normally associate with. They're escaped convicts or former convicts
or runaways,
or just the freaks of society that we have finally been like, maybe you're not freaks, maybe it's just genetically we're all different. But it was a place they could go and have a community of like people.
You're right, and the one thing that's interesting about the setup that's created in this movie is we're never really given to understand completely whether or not the entire carnival is sort of evil by its very nature, or they're just different,
right.
So, because you do have some characters walking around. By the way, you do have your sort of obligatory morality tale here, like you have in a lot of early 80s slashers, where, there's a condemnation of premarital sex, of drug use, and these sorts of things. And you do have some characters going around and sort of issuing these warnings, to the teenagers, God is watching, kind of similar to the Ralph character in Friday the 13th, where he's warning the kids about the death curse of Camp Blood. So yeah, you have these other, not necessarily homicidal characters, but definitely quirky, creepy, and sinister.
Yeah, there are two characters where I'm like, I don't know, do they work there? Do they live there? I know you know exactly, because they are the dirtiest people. Right. There's one woman, she is like the doom voice that God is watching you. And she kind of seems to be omnipresent everywhere. And then there's like a guy who looks like he just got hit by a car and left in a ditch. Like, he is head to toe dirty. He looks like he's bleeding. He's just kind of shuffling through. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. And I wondered to myself, is that...
he's in the very end, too.
Yeah.
Just standing there.
I don't know if it's... if we're really... I mean, I have to believe that there's not this condemnation of carnivals, because if Tobe Hooper loves carnivals that much, you would think that he wouldn't be out to just sort of disgrace them, by making this movie and saying that they're awful people. But it to me, it felt like that character, or those two characters, were just sort of mirroring the general creepiness of an average fair or carnival.
Yeah.
So I don't think they were necessarily supposed to be inserted into any plot line, more than they were just
they added an element of uneasiness,
atmosphere.
Yes.
Yeah, they're adding to the atmosphere of sort of a sinister,
because the guy has no lines.
No,
he's just there for people to bump into and go, ugh.
Right. Yeah, and that's the setup, and it goes back to what we were saying in the beginning, that's kind of the feeling that a lot of us get when we go to these county fairs and carnivals, that they're it's interesting, but it's a little unsettling, isn't it? Aren't you kind of happy when you get the hell out of there?
Oh yeah, that's why I don't go anymore.
I mean, it's fun. It's fun when you're a kid. It's great when you're when
you're ignorant.
You're running around. You're looking at the other boys and girls, and you're kind of just goofing off with your friends, and you're just there for your own experience. But when you start really observing the event itself, that's where those lines get blurred a little bit, and it does feel a little creepy, because you're right. These are, I mean, we're not making this up, folks. I mean, a lot of these workers are people that have run away from home, or maybe they're outrunning the law. These days, I see a lot of international carnival workers. In fact, for the past couple of years here, they've been, I think, largely German.
Really?
And I don't know what they're doing here, or why you would choose that life for yourself if you're going to bother to cross over an ocean,
right?
to run the Tilt-A-Whirl. But it's interesting. But yeah, it all plays into this movie that is not filled with nearly as much blood and guts as your average 80s slasher.
No.
So as far as a recommendation
not really even
goes,
that much blood at all.
No. And so I would probably recommend this movie to somebody that maybe doesn't watch a lot of horror, but they have an interest in it, or maybe they have an interest in slashers.
Yeah.
But a lot of blood and guts make them uneasy.
Yeah.
This would be a great one.
I will say this movie's got some sound issues. There is a lot like quiets and then very louds. Like, I was really battling with what are they saying, and then the music or someone screaming. That can be a little jarring, I think, if you're
right
not used to it.
No, you're right. I mean, the one thing you can say about this movie is that it does a good job of elevating itself from the sort of pedestrian level that it could have been at, but there's certainly another level of polish that could have happened. And let's bring up that brother character
okay.
to just real quick to talk about that, because it stood out so clearly to me as being just a really strange choice, or maybe it's undeveloped.
Yeah, that was like, we need 10 extra minutes in this movie.
Right.
What do we do?
So long story short, folks, without having to kind of recap all of that quote-unquote action leading up to this, but this younger brother of Amy, our final girl, as Andy's mentioned, he's a horror aficionado. Joey.
Little Joey.
Horror aficionado. He he wants to go to the carnival. You get the impression that he loves carnivals. His sister was going to take him, but he scares her, and she gets upset and says that she's not going to take him, but he's going to sneak out of the house and follow her there anyway because he knows that's where she's going.
Yeah.
So we get this long developed subplot of the brother stalking the double date that his sister is on, and as a viewer,
not even though he doesn't find them until they go into the funhouse.
Oh yeah, but he's searching everywhere.
So we get to see him walking there. Some weird hillbilly pulls over and pulls a gun on him.
Right.
Yeah, and it's just him at the carnival. Like,
right.
He pays for tickets. He gets some food.
Yeah.
He goes on some rides.
He wanders around, and I'll tell you something. And this just came to me now. And I don't know, again, if this is just too heady of a point to even make, but is maybe Toby sort of inserting himself?
Right.
Maybe Joey is a reflection of his wonderment of the carnival atmosphere and world.
Yeah.
And that maybe Joey sort of personifies his childhood interest in this environment.
Yeah, that is what I thought, because it seems to be the only thing. Because they set up stuff where you're like, oh, here's where the brother becomes crucial. Like, he sees them go in, but not come out of the fun house.
Right.
He tries to investigate it and is kind of attacked by the Two-Face monster, and then he runs into the the mud guy and finally passes out, or I don't know. But he's found and taken care of by someone who works there. They call his parents. They come and pick him up, and they leave.
And you and you wonder to yourself, like, is this just Tobe Hooper or the writer trying to say that not all carnies are bad? Maybe, I don't know, but it's very much, we're not reading into anything to believe that we thought that the brother was going to be a real integral part of the story. Yeah. And
he's set
then
up to be the hero.
Then he's just absolutely not.
Yeah, he scares her. It's kind of this, like, bad setup for him. And then, yeah, you're like, oh, he shows up. He's the one with the information. Because even the Amy sees them from inside the funhouse and is trying to scream at them. Outside, it's making no noise. Inside, it's the loudest thing I've ever heard.
Right.
But no one hears her. The kid is comatose.
Yeah. Staring
at the funhouse. The mom is like, I gotta get home and have a drink.
Right. Another fist of whiskey.
Yeah. And then they leave. Like, there's no indication he knows they're in there. Nothing.
Yeah. So maybe he is just that reflection. Maybe the fact that it does end so abruptly is kind of like Tobe Hooper saying, I was always interested in this arena of, or this environment, but I never did get to see what was on the other side of that curtain, that he was always interested but was never involved directly with it. I don't know, but either way, it was a little strange, but it's not enough to take you out of the story because coincidentally, pretty much at that same time is right where you're really launching into a lot more steady action. So it's pretty forgivable at that point.
Yeah. Do you let me jump back real quick because I meant to ask this before. The fortune teller, was her accent an act or not? Because there is one line which has no accent, but because when they originally go and see her and get their fortune read or whatever, and they're all high and are kind of laughing, and she kicks them out, and they knock over her table. There's this weird magic. The ball rolls forward, and then it rolls back to her, and she picks it up as just like, don't come back or I'll break all your fucking bones in your body. It's this weird, like, Brooklyn accent. But everything else is this Eastern European. And even when she's with Two-Face Monster, she continues that accent. So I'm like, did I just mishear?
I think it's a great question. I think that we're supposed to believe that the accent is real.
Okay.
Sometimes as if you watch this in movies, you'll see it. If someone is doing, even an accomplished actor is doing an accent in a movie, and they have a line that either requires a loud volume or a lot of anger, they tend to slip back into their natural accent because they're tapping into a more primal emotion. And so I don't know, but you're right. And not only was it the accent shift, but she went from 0 to 60 on being a little like perturbed by these kids to saying, "I'm going to fucking kill you."
Yeah.
Like, is that what she said? Break every bone in your body?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
But I mean, it was really, boy, she just got hot fast.
Do not knock her crystal ball over.
Right.
Which, in that scene, it seemed to move magically.
Yeah, it did. Like as if
a weird
it was
moment
repelled.
that never happens.
Yeah.
And elsewhere within this universe.
You keep waiting, as a viewer, you do keep waiting for maybe there being a supernatural element to this movie, but aside from that ball rolling weird, there really isn't one.
No.
So, there's a lot of good questions about this movie. I mean, again, Andy and I like to read into these movies and see if there is another layer, underneath there. There isn't always, and there also doesn't have to be. But it is a good movie to check out if you do just want to sit back and have some, I don't want to say mindless entertainment, but, a really watchable, good-looking movie, especially for the time period. Or if you do kind of want to pursue the idea of this, what makes a killer guilty, what makes somebody responsible for what they do, or if you just like carnivals and circuses,
right? This is
or the
right
circus
for you.
Is circus a word?
Yeah.
Okay, circus.
Yeah,
circi.
It's just one circus.
If you want, if you like that sort of backdrop and that the scenic quality, the fantastical quality of carnivals, you're going to love this movie.
Yeah. What did you think of the performance of the kids? We didn't really talk too much about the acting chops of them. They each had we did talk about some very specific moments.
I think it's a little, I would say that it's a little uneven, but more good than bad.
Yeah.
There are, Amy herself, our final girl, does show some real genuine peril, like we were talking about earlier, in that final scene. I personally didn't connect to her as much as I typically do with final girls in these films. I don't know if that was the actress or she just wasn't given a lot to work with, with the dialogue.
Yeah.
Buzz, who plays her...
She did get a role in Amadeus as a result of this. She was in Amadeus.
Oh, my God. She's not Mozart's wife,
She also takes off her shirt in it. I don't remember. I know she was in it.
Oh, my God. I knew she looked familiar.
Yeah.
But,
probably.
But Buzz, who plays her date, this guy is... he's all right. He makes some choices that I think are a little over the top. I think he's chewing the scenery a little bit in some spots, but I think he does a really great job of being genuinely freaked out when the shit hits the fan.
Yeah.
Almost to...
He's not as douchey as I thought he would be.
Right.
The way the mom set him up, I'll never trust that mom again because she is a bad judge of character.
Yes,
he was a good guy.
Right. Yeah. In the end, he was a good guy. But I mean, some of his reactions were a little bit unintentionally hilarious. Like when he's screaming for the other girl after she's fallen through the trap door. Her name is Liz.
Yeah. Slamming on it.
Yeah, he's slamming on it, and he's like almost in falsetto range.
Right.
And I've got a bit of a cold right now, so I won't mimic it. But I mean, he is a little like 10-year-old girl screaming for her.
Yeah.
I mean, it is.
Amy's like, who are you on the date with here?
Right. And was he?
You seem really bent out of shape.
Right. But Richie.
You had no problem put an axe in Richie's head. But
Right. Yeah, and poor Richie, that actor has kind of it's a sort of a goofy part. It's kind of, excuse me, maybe we thought it was a bad boy part or party boy part. It's not very clearly defined, but at the end of the day, especially right before his death, like we were talking about, does show some nice chops there.
Yeah, that one story.
Yeah.
Other than that, Richie can go to hell.
Yeah, he's a little goofy.
He, like everything he does in this movie annoyed me.
Yeah.
Nearly everything.
Yeah.
He gets them busted twice because they're about to escape the funhouse after they've witnessed the murder, and he's like, I'm going to go double check and make sure she's dead. To which none of them went, why? No, let's leave. They went, good idea, future Dr. Richie.
Right.
To where he steals all their money then.
Yeah.
So that was, that's what really set off Barker Dad, was he noticed all the money was gone. Then, as Richie's watching that, his lighter falls out of his pocket because he is a weed fiend.
Yeah.
He cannot, and that is something that really bugs me in movies, is people who just overly enjoy pot, like that shit all the time.
Right.
I don't have time for it. He's like, always behind a tent, always like he's always having to catch up because he's trying to get high. His lighter drops out. That's how they know they're up there. Like his death, I thought that was appropriate. Hung and hit in the head with an axe.
Right. Yeah, no,
That guy deserved
he
all
certainly
of that.
caused a lot of, if not all the trouble.
Yeah.
But yeah, as an actor, I mean, he gets the job done, and that's the thing that I love about.
Yeah, maybe I was supposed to hate him more than anything.
Could have been. When it comes to these slashers, one of my the sort of plights that I champion the most is that there are a lot of really good, genuinely good performances by these young actors in a lot of these low budget early 80s slasher films that really gets overlooked because of the blood, the guts, the humor, intentional or otherwise. And a lot of times we sort of gloss over some really genuinely great performances. Now, are any of those great performances in the Funhouse? Maybe not.
Right.
But nobody is distractingly bad.
No.
By no means. Everybody is filling their part, doing what they need to do. And I think there are a couple of the bunch that take it even a notch higher. For example, the Barker, like we're talking about, does an excellent job. So no, there's nothing to take you out of this movie as a viewer. It's a pleasant experience all the way through. There's some fun, and yeah, it's absolutely recommendable.
Yeah, I liked it a lot. I'd seen it. It had been a long time. But it was one of those movies where, because the box art of it was one as a kid I had seen. I'm always like, very intrigued by it. It's just kind of this Jack-in-the-Box clown with an axe in his hand, which I feel doesn't represent.
No.
So then the first time I watched the movie and they showed Two-Face Monster, I was like, what is happening right now?
Right.
And it takes this weird turn with him. And yeah, it's not like I was expecting like magical Funhouse where all the animatronics are real and do the killing, but no, it's none of that.
No. And that just brings to mind that, just to touch on it real quick, really great and creepy opening sequence in this movie. The title sequence just has these little vignettes of various animatronics and dolls and mannequins in it, and it has some creepy carnival music. And so it's a really nice
And
setup.
those are all old vintage pieces they had got. Like one of them is Winston Churchill.
Oh, is that who that was?
Yeah. So
awesome.
it's like, and Tobe Hooper is like, I ended up buying all of them.
Oh, yeah, of
I
course.
just own those all now. But he's like, we totally lucked out on, there's like the big fat lady on the top with this weird laugh. Like everything is very unsettling, just the way it looks.
And authentic, yeah.
Yes.
I mean, it just I didn't know that it was all authentic, but I mean, it really shows through as a viewer.
Yeah.
Here's the thing, as sort of a final thought on this movie. There are going to be some of these films that I would personally encourage people to watch very seriously, even if the tone is a little silly in some of these films. There are a lot of slashers that I very much, very wholeheartedly believe are excellent films, both from a directing, writing, acting standpoint, cinematography. I mean, I really do think that there are some high quality films in this canon. There are other films that are really best enjoyed as entertainment, and that's how I would recommend this one.
Yeah.
This is the one where if you've got some witty friends, go out and get whatever refreshments you enjoy, sit around with a group of your friends, watch this movie. There's nothing that's so intricate plot-wise that you're going to miss anything.
Right.
So you can sit there and you can, have some beers and relax a little bit. You can
talk over it.
Yeah, talk over it, make some fun comments. It's tailor-made for that.
Yeah.
So I would say as just a general fun filmmaking experience, just have a good time with this one.
I agree. I recommend it. It's just a lot of fun. I couldn't get anyone in my house to watch it with me, so I watched it alone. It wasn't as fun, but maybe someday.
Yeah. I'll watch it with you.
Oh, thanks, Timmy.
Okay.
We should do that sometime.
Yeah,
Maybe
why
get
not?
together
Yeah,
and hang out.
Maybe we'll talk about it afterward.
Well, all right. So that was 1981's The Funhouse, directed by Tobe Hooper. 2 thumbs up from us. Don't forget, you can follow us on the Instagram under Slumber Podcast Massacre. Also, if you have any questions, comments about any of the movies we've done or about our private lives, you can email us at slumberpodcast@gmail.com. Tune in next time where we'll be covering Return of the Living Dead, one of Timmy's favorites.
Yeah, now that's one that I'm going to get real serious about, folks.
Man.
Even though it's absolutely just batshit crazy and hysterical, like that one, that's one of my favorites. So you're going to enjoy that one.
Excellent. All right. Well, I can't wait. Thanks again for listening, and we will see you next time. See you later, Timmy.
See you, Andrew.